Donald Trump has arrived. I mean, there's a lot of talk about him changing some financial regulations, improving things from the point of view of global banks. Is there a particular thing you really want him to change on the financial side?
Yeah, so think of two things. One is legislation. So obviously that's harder to do than changing just regulation. So regulators can change a lot of things easily about compliance, certain costs, certain rules about lending, how you lose your liquidity, how you lose your capital. I would like to see some of those looked at and maybe modified a bit. And I think it'll be good for the economy. So it's not about JPMorgan Chase, but it's about banks lending more. So if you go to all the bankers I know and said, if we reduce this a little bit, reduce that, would you be more aggressive in lending and growing? The answer is yes, they would. And so I think that would help the economy. And some of the legislation stuff, people ask me about Dodd-Frank and all that. I'm not someone for wholesale throwing it all out. What I would kind of be for is no one in their rational mind can say that everything was done and how it was done right. There's thousands of things done and no one agrees with all of them, nor are they synchronized, coordinated, consistent, coherent. So it makes sense when you have legislation after a while to open it up, look what worked, look what didn't, recalibrate it, modify it, change it to accomplish what you want to do, which is what I call good regulation, not just more regulation.
And what would be top of your list in terms of change?
Oh, God. America's gold, we do a lot of what they call gold plating, capital and liquidity requirements. I would take a look at that again. I would look at certain liquidity ratios. In the United States of America, there's $2.5 trillion sitting at the central bank called excess reserves. $2.5 trillion. But in the old days, excess reserves meant that you're free to lend it. Okay? We are not free to lend that. And about $400 billion of that's JPMorgan's. And we're not free to lend it because of all these new requirements. So kind of regulatory requirements are deeply affecting monetary policy. I'm not sure we understand that. No, I'm not saying get rid of liquidity requirements. I'm saying look at how you calibrate them and see how they may have reduced lending or something like that, and then make a bit of a change.
There's a problem with liquidity rather than capital. The basic idea of forcing banks to hold more capital, you've gone along with.
Capital, too. They have this thing called operational risk capital, which we didn't have in 2007. And remember, JPMorgan didn't need money, wasn't bailed out, had plenty of capital. We now have almost 3 times as much capital. And they added something called operational risk capital for operational losses, legal, which today I'm not denying there aren't operational risks, but we also earn a lot of money. So every company in the world has operational risk, but this capital, I call it permanently idle capital. It's $32 billion. It's been sitting there, and it'll sit there forever. Even if you get out of the businesses that caused it, the way they do the current calculation. So I'm not against them having operating risk capital. That's too much. The system has $400 billion. I think it's $400 billion. It simply doesn't need it, and that's direct money that which you can't lend. Can't use at all.